Hi everyone, it's Carl and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be looking at a very surprising and yet important topic that's been making waves. That is, why are so many high-skilled immigrants leaving Canada? Now, Canada is often seen as the promised land for immigrants, right? It's a place where talent is valued and opportunities abound. But what if I told you that more and more skilled immigrants, like nurses, like engineers, even entrepreneurs, are choosing to leave Canada? And here's the twist. These are not desperate people with no options and stuff like that. These are individuals with permanent residency or some even with citizenship, okay? People who can stay if they actually want to, but they're opting to leave. Now, why is that happening and what does that mean for Canada in the long term? Will this affect Canada's future? So we're going to dive into this and uncover the real story behind this growing trend. But first of all, let's look at the statistics, okay? Because numbers don't lie, right? Now, a report by the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, known as the ICC, they had a report called the Leaky Bucket, okay? Now, this study found that onward immigration, that is the number of immigrants that leave Canada, is at an all-time high, okay? So they are having record numbers of that. Now, the data also shows that immigrants who landed in Canada since 1982 are leaving at an annual rate of 0.9%. Now, most of these departures, that is about 34%, happen within the first 5 years of arrival. So those that got here, let's say in 2015, some of them check out by 2020. Okay, so based on this, the ICC is forecasting that by 2030, about 5.1% of immigrants admitted in 2025 will have left Canada. Okay, now here's the big thing. These are highly skilled immigrants, as I mentioned, like nurses, like truckers, like tradespeople, and even entrepreneurs. Those are the people that are leaving, okay? And these are the individuals that have PR, that have citizenship, so they can easily stay, but they are opting for better futures abroad. And these are actually the people that Canada struggled to bring in the first place, okay? So the big question is, obviously, what is driving these people away? Why are they leaving? Now, let's break it down. Now, one of the biggest reasons, which cannot be ignored in this conversation, is the skyrocketing cost of living. Okay, now let's start with housing. Now, in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, housing is simply unaffordable for many people, including immigrants. A one-bedroom apartment can cost over 2,500 Canadian dollars monthly. Okay, that's on average. Now, if you add in groceries and transportation and utilities, this leaves many families stretched, okay, financially. Now, when you move to everyday expenses, then you look at the rising prices for food and gas. These also make the day-to-day life harder for immigrants, especially those who are supporting families here or back home, or families here and back home. If you're an immigrant, I think you know what I'm talking about. So this becomes quite hectic for immigrants, and we cannot ignore this. This is one of the main reasons why they leave. So even skilled immigrants with well-paying jobs find the financial strain too much, and this actually prompts them to explore other countries where their money goes further. Okay, that's basically it. That's one of the first reasons. Now, let's look at the second reason. This is also something that cannot be ignored. The job market. The job market. Now, let's talk about jobs, okay? Now, Canada promotes itself as a land of opportunity, but the reality for many high-skilled immigrants is very, very different, okay? Now, the study highlighted that skilled workers like nurses, like truck drivers, and the tradespeople face significant barriers. Now, let's discuss a few of these barriers. First of all, credential recognition issues. Many immigrants spend years recertifying their qualifications, which often delays their careers. So you might come here with your qualification from wherever you're coming from, and it might not be enough So you may have to do top-up courses. You may have to get certain certifications done, and before you could even enter the profession that you really want to. I can use pharmacists as an example. I know that if you're a pharmacist back home or in your home country and you move to Canada and want to actually go into the same profession as a pharmacist, it is not an easy process, okay? First of all, you need to have your qualifications evaluated by the PEBC. That's like the pharmacy board in Canada. So you'd have your qualifications evaluated, and this actually costs money, and it takes time as well. Okay, so after all the time and all the money, they evaluate your qualifications and then allow you to now proceed to the next stage. Now, the next stage, you would need to write 4 different exams. Okay, so if you're an immigrant and you're a pharmacist back home, this can be a very tough process because you first of all need to write the evaluation exam. You need to write the qualifying exam. You need to write a practical exam, and you would also need to write a jurisprudence exam as well. Okay, and with these exams, the thing is you only have a limited number of tries for these exams. Okay, and if you exhaust the number of tries, you may have to actually go and register for a course or another program, finish that program before you can come back and write these exams again. So as you can see, this is not a very easy process for someone in the pharmacy profession. And I know it's similar for other people in other professions as well. So this credential recognition issues and, all the hurdles they have to jump, immigrants have to jump in order to get their qualifications recognized is also one of the factors, because they have to do all this before they even enter the job market. Now, the other thing is underemployment, so while a lot of people need to go through this process, like a doctor, like a nurse, like a pharmacist, they need to recertify, they need to get their qualifications here to top up what they brought from back home. While they are doing that, they still need to survive. That's the reality, okay? So they would end up taking other jobs, okay? So you might see doctors or engineers ending up working in retail or driving taxis just to make ends meet. It is the stark reality, okay? There was actually a joke. It's not even a funny joke, but it was actually a joke that most of the taxi drivers, I think either in Canada or the USA, actually have PhDs from back home. And that is the stark reality. It is not a joke. So there are many highly skilled immigrants that just cannot get in yet. They can't get the foot in the door. Okay, so they have to do something to survive. So you see them working menial jobs, and that can get very, very depressing. So guess what? Some just pack up and leave. Okay, they just leave, or they go to other countries where they might be able to fit in better and get those jobs. And then the last one is what the employers also call Canadian work experience. Okay, so even when your qualifications are okay and all of that, that may be a last hurdle that you may have to jump. Now, this Canadian work experience thing, often employers would prioritize this, say that, well, you're coming from another country, you do not have experience in Canada. And this creates a frustrating cycle for newcomers because the newcomers can't get jobs in their field because they lack Canadian experience, even if they have years of experience. So you can have someone with about 10 years of experience from their home country, but just because they do not have Canadian work experience, employers are shying away from that person. And this is really tough. So this mismatch between skills and jobs doesn't just affect finances, it's emotionally draining. For many, the frustration of being unable to work in their field is a key reason for leaving. Okay, and remember, it's not just those struggling who are leaving, it's often those who've established themselves but feel they can achieve more elsewhere. Okay, some just think, well, there are better options, and then they just pack up and leave. Now, let me give you some real life examples. So there was a nurse that came to Canada with over 10 years of experience, okay, and after struggling to get her credentials recognized, she eventually left for the US. It's just next door, okay? Now, when she got to the US, her qualifications were accepted and her salary was significantly higher. I bet you know that the US dollar is a little bit higher than the Canadian dollar, right? So that's one example. And there is also another example of an IT professional that moved to Canada. He was hoping to advance in his career. And after 2 years of underemployment, working in different roles that he did not really fit in, he received an offer from a European company, and he decided to just pack up and leave. So these stories are becoming more common. I've also heard the story of an architect and his wife that just packed up and left, because of the same issues. And the stories are just becoming too common. And these are just showing how systemic barriers, push even talented and determined individuals to just look elsewhere. And some of the reasons that I can also chip in here are that, first of all, the weather is also one of the factors why immigrants or some immigrants leave. Canada's weather is a little harsh. It's colder for longer. Summer is just for a short while, just a few months, and then you have fall, and then you have winter, which can get very, very cold depending on where you are in Canada. And for immigrants that come from warmer countries or warmer climates, some of them actually struggle to adjust, to the weather. And, some of them actually end up leaving based on this. Now, this is not something that the government can actually do anything about, but it is one of the minor reasons why some immigrants leave. And another that I know most of you can actually relate to is homesickness. In Canada, most people do not find a sense of community like back home, especially if you're from Africa. We have this sense of community and friendliness and all of that. But in Canada, yes, the people are friendly, but everybody is in their zone, kind of. So depression is real. Loneliness is very, very real as well. So things can get tough for some people. They get very depressed. They get very lonely. It's very difficult to make friends for some people, and they may just pack up and go back home or go to another country where they feel they can get that kind of connection. Okay. The report also found that immigrants in large cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are leaving at higher rates than those in smaller cities. Okay. And I know that you may have guessed the first reason: housing costs, and limited community support, and the overwhelming hassle of big city life make it difficult for some people to actually settle. Now, in smaller cities like Calgary, like Halifax, and Moncton or other cities like that, they are more of a slower pace. Okay. Those cities are not fast paced like your Torontos or your Vancouvers, and they often have lower costs, which is why the report also shows that those places have a higher retention rate. The immigrants there actually stay longer than in the big cities. Okay, so with all this being said, what does it really mean for Canada? Now, losing highly skilled immigrants has serious consequences. Okay, these are the very people driving Canada's economy. They are building their homes, they're caring for families, and they're leading innovation. Now, as more skilled workers leave, sectors like healthcare, trades, and tech face growing shortages. Now, Canada actually has labor shortages in some of these sectors like healthcare and others, right? And if these people, if the immigrants continue leaving, then the labor shortage will be even more severe. Okay. Now, public opinion on immigration is also shifting, with the lowest support in decades. And Canada, as we've all heard in the news and all of that, Canada cutting down on its immigration targets as well. So this could make it even harder, for Canada to attract and retain talent in the future. Because a lot of people, looking at all that is going on in Canada, are considering other options, and that's just natural, right? So what can Canada learn from other countries? The truth is, Canada is not the only country that is struggling with retention, but there are some countries that have taken some steps that I think Canada can learn from. For example, in Australia, they offer clear pathways to credential recognition for skilled immigrants. So these pathways are clear and a little less complicated. If you also look at Germany, they provide extensive language training and employer connections for newcomers. I know Canada has something like that, but that may have to be ramped up more. And if you look at our neighbors, the United States, it's a little bit challenging there as well in certain areas, but they have higher salaries and simpler credential transfer processes, okay? Compared to Canada, Canada is a little bit more frustrating. Canada has the potential, it just needs to do some of these things a bit more and address some of these gaps. So finally, I want us to discuss some things that I think Canada can do to improve, call them actionable steps. And number one on that list is, I think Canada should streamline credential recognition, make it faster for immigrants to get certified in their respective professions. I've heard many immigrants that are highly skilled complain about, the credential recognition system and the length of the process. Sometimes it takes too long. Okay? And the second one, which I know Canada is actually working on, the Prime Minister spoke about it a few days ago, is affordable housing. Okay? So I think if Canada continues investing in affordable housing and providing these solutions, it would reduce costs, not just for newcomers, but even for those already in Canada. And then third one that I think Canada can do is employer education. So encourage the companies to value international experience just as much as Canadian experience. Okay, I've heard people from the United States even face this issue about Canadian work experience. I mean, it's just next door, right? And sometimes you'd find people that have worked for multinational companies, like big companies, and they still move to Canada and they are told you don't have Canadian work experience. And the reality is sometimes employers use this to just lowball the applicants and give them a low offer, So maybe employer education could also help. And lastly, I also think better support systems would also help, by expanding settlement programs that help immigrants integrate socially and professionally. I think that would also help. And I think with these changes, Canada can become a place where immigrants actually thrive, not where they just arrive and then leave. So there you have it. Those are my candid thoughts, taking a closer look at why highly skilled immigrants are leaving Canada and what can be done to change this trend. What do you think? Do you think Canada is doing enough to retain its immigrants? Is struggling so hard to bring in the immigrants? And do you think Canada is doing enough to retain the immigrants? Or are some of these challenges too big to overcome? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And as always, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel as it really helps to grow the channel, and hit the notification bell for more insights into life in Canada. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.